What is up, Facebook land? Welcome to another episode of the Two Dates and a Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Kubler. Before I introduce my man, Riley Cote, I want to dedicate the show. I'm dedicating the show to people that are fighting with MS. I know Riley's sister has battled with MS, and I personally have a lot of friends and family that I work with through Max Out that are battling MS. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted Riley on the show today. Because what he's doing in the hemp and cannabis world has a lot of ripple effects outside of just what everybody thinks they see on TV today with that. There's so many more applications for it in ways that people can be helped. And, MS is a very unknown disease. There's not a lot of it can be one way one day and one way another day. And you don't really know what you're going to get when you have MS. And as somebody who does rehab with people that have MS, it's one of the harder diseases for me to work with because I don't know what I'm getting each day. And the neurological system it does its own thing sometimes. And the way MS works, it just blocks those signals. And some days they have good days and some days they don't. So that's what I'm dedicating the show to today is people fighting with MS. The podcast, you can hear it everywhere, iTunes, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, Anchor, anywhere that you listen to podcasts pretty much, you can find Two Dates and a Dash. I recommend everybody go on to iTunes. If you're an iTunes subscriber, an Apple person, go on iTunes, give me a 5-star rating, give me a review, subscribe. The more listeners, the higher my rating gets, which means people can search it easier. So it just seems to help that way. So now my man, Riley, not a lot of introduction required. He was a former flyer. Dude could throw rights and lefts with the best of them. I think today he's probably wishing he didn't throw as many rights and lefts or take as many as he had taken. But he was a great flyer, a great guy that protected a lot of the big name players on the team and made sure that nobody messed with them. Today he has BodyChek is the name of his company. He's got Cannabis line, hemp line. He's got all kinds of things going on in the business world, and he's still local, living up in the Lehigh Valley. And so without further ado, my man, former flyer, Riley Cote. What's up, bud?
What's going on? Thanks for having me.
Nah, man, it's awesome. I'm so happy you're here. I'm happy you're on the show. Just so everybody knows, Riley and I met probably 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Our mutual friend, Dennis Shea. Dennis was our director of sales for Max Out for a long time. And Riley and him are buddies, and he brought Riley into Max Out to get a workout in. I think he enjoyed it. And we just sort of connected from there. And he's been a really good friend and stayed in touch. And that's why we're doing the show today. So, Riley, I start the show off with one question. I try to keep it as simple as possible because I'm a simple man. The question I want to ask you is, who is Riley Cote?
It's a deep question. Well, Riley Cote today is certainly a lot different than Riley Cote, back in my meathead days. I retired in 2010 and took on a different path in life. But I'm first a father, a businessman, a healer, philanthropist, advocate, all the above. I mean, I got a lot of different things going on. I wear a lot of different hats. But when I'm retired, I just I needed to change my path. The way I was playing on the ice and the way I was living off the ice wasn't sustainable. And I kind of hit a crossroads in life at the age of 28 and forced to retire from my playing days. Not necessarily forced. I mean, my hands were forced a little bit, but it was a decision I made. To really find an exit strategy that was going to help my long-term mental health and physical health and the whole bit. So, long story short, it was just kind of just started attacking some natural healing books and started changing my diet and just started reading about Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine and started understanding the cannabis plant a little bit more in depth and became extremely passionate about all these things combined and started a nonprofit called the Hemp Heals Foundation back then, supporting sustainable agriculture as a viable agricultural crop and medicine and food and fiber and textile and the whole bit. And it just evolved. Now it's just kind of using the sports platform, hockey platform to really drive these messages home. And, it's been an interesting journey for sure.
I think the thing that stands out to me is that you hit a crossroads. And one of the biggest commonalities in the show is I feature people that have had that crossroad that they've had to meet. It's 2 dates and a dash. The date you're born, the date that you die, and the dash is what you do with your life. And a lot of people, they get caught up in the moments, they get caught up in where they are today, and they don't take the time to step back, look at the journey they were on and how they got to where they are, and are they happy with that place they're at today. And it doesn't mean the journey wasn't worth it. It just means sometimes you got to take a step back and evaluate. And it sounds like that's what you did.
I did, in a very deep way. And it was one of those things where you don't realize in the moment when you're an athlete and you're so wrapped up in the here and now and worrying about yourself, the ego is kind of driving the driving force of your being. And, when the physical body starts breaking down, and I was a fighter, a banger, and, a lot of fights, so taking punches and just the physical wear and tear of hockey, it just ran its course on me. But what I learned is when I was at this crossroads was that it didn't matter how much money I made, and not that I was a big time guy anyways, but it was the most money I ever made. Playing the NHL, living my childhood dream, doing all these great things that on paper, from an outsider's perspective, is an awesome life. And don't get me wrong, it had its awesome moments. But what I realized is it wasn't fulfilling, my spirit. And it's hard to explain when you have all these great things going for you, but it just wasn't, it just wasn't sitting well with me. I think that's what weighed on my shoulders so much, where it kind of pushed me over the fence to retire. Was I could have probably slugged it out for a few more years, probably landing up in the minors. Doing that and fighting everyone and their brother down there. But I was just kind of like done with that. I seen this as an exit strategy. I got into coaching, but I also just got into a very different type of life where I was just like started reading. I never read a book in my whole life up until then. I don't think finished one anyways, and started just reading, and I say isolating myself, but just like stepping away from the party. You know what I mean? I needed to step away from that scene where it was unsustainable living. The way I was going on the ice was, it was just as hard off the ice, if not harder, so it's something's got to give. And I had to make a decision. It was kind of like, I was going to do this. I was all in. That was the way I was, when I'm wired. When I choose to do something, I'm all in, you know what I mean? So it was like, I'm all in. I have to do this for myself. It's spiritual development, personal growth, transformation. And it just led down so many different paths. It's kind of like the old term, your vibe attracts your tribe. Once you start, frequently being around people that are in the space, in the healing space, whether they're, they're yogis or, in the cannabis hemp space or whatnot, it's just a different world versus me, be posting up at the bar every other night. And you know what I mean? It's just a different vibration, different type of people you attract. And I'm not saying that in a really derogatory way, meaning anybody in disrespect to anybody at the bar, but I think you know what I mean by that is, you know what I mean? I think it's just one of the things I had to do. I had to surround myself with, more positive people and people in my world and people that were starting to, that I felt like I was thinking in the same lines as, and it's just been amazing. It's something that I never, when I started doing this it's just kind of like when you follow the natural laws of the universe, I feel like things just work out the way they're supposed to. I didn't really have an exact plan for all this. I just knew that in my heart I needed to dedicate my time and resources to, supporting real life. I say charity. You know what I mean? I did a lot of work. You mentioned MS. I did a lot of work for these, I say corporate charities where I'm raising a lot of money and I'm kind of handing over this money, and I don't really feel like it's being used properly. It's not being really used to find the true root causes of these diseases. And I mean, really, to tell you the truth, it's usually invested in just masking tape of these diseases. So I wanted to step back and remove myself from supporting that type of stuff. And then I realized the hemp and cannabis play, which is a tool in the grand scheme of things, but very powerful tools nonetheless, that this helped increase quality of life for so many people. I've seen it with my sister. I've seen it in my own life. I've seen it around virtually everyone in my life that's, to touch this plant, the positive stories that comes along with it. So it was something I could easily stand behind, and it's been the driving force of my advocacy. I say the healing component is I'm in discussions and talks with patients and veterans and all kinds of different walks of life that are all struggling with different things, and we realize that we're all human. We all are struggling. We all have things to take care of and manage, and there's a sustainable way. I use that in a way where sustainability means you can do this long periods of time without it maxing out on you, and you can't do it any longer that way, versus the unsustainable way where, like, the way I was living, it's, muscle relaxers and sleeping pills and alcohol, and you know what I mean? and trying to wake up in the morning and work out as hard as I can. And, you know, recovery is not as good as it should be. So it just made a whole lot of sense for tying, you know, these specific tools together and kind of creating this, you know, this, I say, a package of wellness. It's a way of life, really. I mean, it's cannabis and hemp are great, but they are just a tool, and there's other tools. I mean, when you talk about this journey in life, it's not just about how much money you can make, how big of a house you can have, and how nice of a car you can have. There's much more to it. And I think what I've learned is that this mental health crisis is probably even bigger than the opioid crisis when you talk about a healthcare crisis in this country and in the West here specifically. But we're spiritually disconnected. You know, we're more connected in theory than ever. You know, I mean, we all have smartphones. We can access all this information, but we're confused. There's misinformation. We don't identify with ourselves and our beings. And I think that for that reason, our mental health deteriorates because we're not serving the spirit, and we're not fulfilling our actual primal needs. You know what I mean? You look around the world and throughout history, the people, the minimalists, the people that live the simplest, seem to be the happiest. And it's because they have a connection with not just, you know, their community, but the land, their food, and all these things that do matter. We are natural beings. We forget that. I think we live in this natural world and we forget that we're natural beings, and we all of a sudden have to abide by different natural laws or unnatural laws. But it's crazy when you think of the way we manage medicine, for example, is we'll live this unsustainable life. We'll drink all day long. We'll drink refined sugar, refined carbohydrates all day long, all this processed food. And then all of a sudden we get the bad news that we have a disease state now, which is your body's way of delivering a signal to saying that something's wrong. Let's fix it. Let's get to the root cause of it. But then we don't want to be accountable to the fact that maybe our environment that we've created in our diet and the way we've lived maybe contributed to this disease state. And then we just want to, you know, show up to the doctor and just expect that he's going to magically cure you. But I mean, what I've learned is like being accountable. I'm accountable for me, you know, say ruining my own hockey career. I'm accountable for you know, all the alcohol and all the shit I did when I played. I'm accountable, and I realized that by me being accountable and owning it, I was able to find myself because I wasn't making excuses any longer. You know what I mean? And you know, when I say the word healer, it's like, you know, people think of like, you know, like someone just going to come and magically touch you on the shoulders and everything's going to go away and life, you know, live happily ever after. But what it really is planting these different seeds for people to understand that they have to make change to really see significant change. And that's just daily habits, daily behaviors. It starts from the second you wake up. What are your first 3 things you do? You know what I mean? For me, it used to be from probably drinking coffee and jacking myself up with some sort of, Sudafed or whatever it was to you know, drinking, you know, distilled water with lemon and Himalayan pink salt, and, you know, and starting off with a CBD capsule with a mushroom blend, you know, a totally different start to the day and totally different impact for, you know, for that day, but for you know, for the long term, you know, your mental health and your physical health is just like, it's totally different. You think that as an athlete, a professional athlete, that I would have been in the best shape of my life, and I would have been, you know what I mean? But I wasn't. I look back, I wasn't in good shape. I lifted a lot of weights. You know what I mean? I was not a functional hockey player. I wasn't even a functional fighter. I lifted so many weights I was stiff. So now I've gone the opposite way. I mainly do yoga just as a, you know, as a breathing tool and just, you know, just the functionality of the body and increasing flexibility and that whole bit. But you know, I look at exercise completely different. You know, it's kind of like this. I went from this, you know, mindless warrior mentality to more of a mindful one, and just now it's kind of about rest and repair. So it's been interesting. There's a lot of components to this. This is forever. You know, you're constantly growing. You're constantly learning new things, and, you know, better ways to take care of yourself and better ways to give back and help people. And it's been a true blessing. You know, you never think that getting punched in the face for a living can actually knock some sense into you and push you into a corner. The universe has an interesting way sometimes to do that, and you have to work with it and listen to it. Otherwise, you're going to be resisting and suffering for long periods of time. I learned that.
I think, first of all, that was I don't even know how to break all that. That was like an amazing soliloquy there. But the thing that really resonated for me is that you can't get to where you are unless you've been to where you were.
Yeah.
Right. So your journey of who you are and who you were, you know, I tell my story all the time, how I went from being my brother's keeper and protecting my brother who was autistic and stuttered to when he died, I lost that. And I went through a period of time where I didn't know who I was. And I went through depression and I went through guilt and all this stuff. And if I hadn't come out of that and had a moment, and whether it's spirituality or faith in God or whatever you want to call it, I had a moment. For me, it was God's grace that allowed me to have a second chance to relive my life, not do over, but just take everything that I've learned along the way and use it in a more purposeful way. And I think the same thing with you. When you went, you know, you were one of my favorite players. I'm a banger. I have zero athletic ability. I can hit hard. I can run things over. I've got a big ass, so I don't get knocked over a lot. So, I mean, I had a few physical God-given things that allow me to sort of stay up on my feet, and I can take a good punch. And so I loved watching the banger. You know, Schulte was one of my favorites, and you and what's his name, Donald Brashear, and guys like that. That to me, those are the guys. My company is called I Got You, and my entire life I've told everybody, if you need me, I got you. That's just my world. And the enforcer in hockey was the I Got You guy. Like if anybody needed anything, if the coach said, I need you to protect Lindros, or I need you to protect Roenick, or whoever was out on the ice at the time, you went out there and you did it. And that was your job. And so I appreciate that role. And as much as people will minimize that you were just a banger and you just got into fights and you were a goon and whatever other derogatory term goes with that position, I would argue that you're one of the most valuable pieces and commodities on a hockey team. And that without that role, there's chaos. And things just go, especially in that era, things will just run amok. So I think where you are today with your awareness of who you are, I think that knowledge that you were that guy, even though it was a hockey game, you played a very significant role. Mm-hmm. You were the protector and you were a enforcer. And I think that transitions well into where you are today, knowing all those things that you knew about the brute force side of things and understanding how to accomplish things that way. Now that you're in this more spiritual, holistic, more earth-based enforcement of the world, you're creating this aura of protectiveness around people that you're contacting. I think it's a pretty cool transition. And I think when you take a step back and look at your journey, dude, I get the pro sports issue with prescription medication and with the opioid crisis. I mean, it's everywhere. It's not just in hockey. It's in every sport. And very few athletes come out of playing sports without some level of a problem with alcohol, pills, something in order to mask the pain they're going through. Because they spent their careers eating them like Tic Tacs because they have to maintain their place on the roster so they can maintain their revenue stream coming in and get their next contract, and for as long as that can go. As much as you sacrifice and as much as you gained financially and ego and notoriety and the fact you can use hockey today as part of your platform, you suffered because of it. And you paid a penalty for it. But not everybody can come out where you're at and see the value of thinking about something a different way. How do I achieve reducing my pain and helping myself sleep and feeling better without toxifying my body?
Yep.
And I think you found you got into it. God has whether it's God or whatever you believe in, God's got a mysterious way of handling things. Mm-hmm. He put you in this position at the time when you were meant to be there so that you could be one of the people that goes out and shares this message on how to handle this stuff. So that guys, the generations coming out of playing sports over the next 10, 15, 20 years don't have to have that searching component. Someone's going to be there to help them. And I think that's all.
Yeah, that's you said it. You nailed it right from the start there. Identity crisis. I think that's what most guys struggle with when they retire. Your whole life you've been known as the athlete, the hockey player. And then whether it's an acute injury or a career-ending injury that happens or just it's time to retire, is all of a sudden it's like you're not that anymore. Unless you're a big-time name, no one gives a shit about you. You know what I mean? It's one of those things. So it's like usually the game with some sort of injury, surgery, whatever it is, and and it's not cannabis or hemp they're giving you. It's an opioid, and you know what I mean, the whole bit. And then like, traditionally, people self-medicate with alcohol. So you mix in those toxic substances with an identity crisis per se, because all of a sudden a lot of these guys don't know who they are. You know what I mean? They don't know where they fit in society because they've been glorified for essentially a job they've done. It's been a cool job and it's a sport, but that doesn't define their spirit. And I think you said it, where I was able to take some hardship and some suffering from me being a on ice warrior to taking that mentality in a totally different fashion and still keeping the fight alive. I'm not just, if I was fighting for my teammates, literally, bare knuckle brawling, and now the fight is more strategic. It's a bigger fight. You know what I mean? I'm putting myself out there and speaking publicly about my cannabis use and talking positively about this plant, where a lot of people still don't understand it at all. So it's still taboo. It's still federally illegal on the medical side. The hemp side's different now. That was passed in 2018 in December here, but things are changing, but it's still very misunderstood. And I say, like, it takes balls to fight. It just takes balls to fight on the ice. It takes balls to fight off the ice. It takes balls to put yourself out there and challenge 85 years of prohibition. You know what I mean? It's especially when you're going up against medical establishment and law enforcement's in the business of enforcing the law, but everything we've been told is almost the complete opposite, especially when it comes to cannabis. And you realize when you're in this space why people have sacrificed their lives for this plant. It's because it works. It's because it's a healing plant. You know what I mean? They've realized that we've been fundamentally and systematically misled when it comes to medicine and food and agriculture, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, this plant is bad, and it's it creates violence and this and this and this, all this propaganda, and all of a sudden it's like, what? It's like this magical healing plant. You think that's by accident? Could science be that wrong? Or is it is it a political maneuver? I mean, that's essentially what it is. I mean, the medical establishment once promoted smoking cigarettes, and they've outlawed cannabis, which now interferes with all pharma. So once you start connecting these dots, you can't help but get pissed off and try and make change, because I've seen my fellow brethren go down with opioid addiction, alcohol addiction, and are not here today. And there's guys that are going through that are still here, and unfortunately they're spiritually dead. They need to be injected with some spirit somehow, and it's hard for these guys to get out of this hole. So I know there's a better way. I've lived it. I've seen my family members live it. I've seen so many different people in my support groups live it, and it's just like you can't help but stand on the rooftop and shout out and put yourself out there. But this is not selfishly for me in business. Like that's a byproduct of me standing up and advocating. Years before I even got paid 1 cent for this. I mean, I've been advocating for this since 2011 publicly when I started my Hemp Heals Foundation. But it wasn't until like this past year where I actually started, actually getting into the business of. It's been mainly advocacy, education, and waving the flag. And so now, it's rewarding in the sense that you can do both. You can make a living while doing what you love and helping people. And now the beautiful thing about it is I'm integrating it back into the hockey world, working with the NHL Alumni Association, been in front of the Flyers alumni, helping current players out, former players out. It's come full circle. It's been so interesting these last couple of years, really.
I think people, I don't make I'm a cop, been a cop 26 years.
Yep.
I smoked marijuana in high school. I get it, right? Everybody wants to tie getting high with cannabis and hemp. Like there's this automatic connection. And that's just not the case. The value of the plant and the healing components, of it are 1 million X the value of what getting high is of a marijuana cigarette, right? So people don't see that, and I obviously I'm not allowed to be involved in the cannabis industry or use these things or anything like that. And I think that's wrong. If there was a way to the biggest thing that I hear from people is that, and I know people that use the cannabis oils and the salves and vapes and things like that. that it's not, because it's not regulated, because it's not, the processes on how to create the products aren't necessarily foolproof. Like when you make an aspirin is the same out of, you got a 200 in a bottle, it's the same, theoretically, same aspirin 200 times. Mm-hmm. And the things I'm hearing from people is that the one product, its reliability on how it works versus the same type of product from another company is two different results. And is that what you're finding in the industry right now because of where it's at in its infancy?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's there's a lot of people capitalizing off naive consumers. Absolutely, they're putting together a really low grade product, putting a nice label on it. Branding 101, CBD in large bold letters. And really people have no idea what they're buying. So unfortunately, since it is unregulated, even the legal hemp stuff, the FDA is going to be drawing a line in the sand here pretty soon. They've been sending out letters for people doing exactly what you're saying, is either mislabeling the bottles where they're claiming to have 1,000 milligrams of CBD in this hemp extract, and there's maybe only 100 or none for that matter. And then the other kicker is, this is medicine. I look at, food is medicine, is that there's heavy metals, heavy metals that are floating around in this, whether it's from the soil that they grew it in or just some of the suspension agents that are, toxic. So yeah, you have to do your research and really know what you're buying. People are spending their hard-earned money on essentially snake oil right now because, they're buying it at a gas station or wherever else you can find it these days. And if you're buying, I look at this as food, right? I mean, it's just like you support your local farmer. I go to local farmers market, kind of at least understanding whereabouts my food's coming from. Instead of this industrialized food system where you have no idea, it's full of pesticides and heavy metals and the whole bit. Same thing with the hemp plant. I mean, we take pride with our company, from the soil up. The genetics is one thing, the soil. I mean, it's organically grown. These are medicinal plants. They're grown below 0.3% THC for the hemp side of things, but they're very, very potent if it's done properly, and they work really, really well. High anti-inflammatory, but like you said, not all CBD products are the same. And I think you could see that. You could say that in a lot of facets of industry and supplements and all that stuff, right? There's the guys that do it extremely cheap and their margins are a lot higher. And then there's the guys that put together a higher quality product, margins are lower, and they're doing it for a different reason than just exploiting Mother Nature. You know what I mean? So we've already seen that. You're seeing people that are doing it the right way, the organic farmer, the holistic philosophy, and then you're seeing it really just done super poorly. So buyer beware. And so I always say, until it's like regulated, and even then, there's always going to be people taking shortcuts. They're just trying to make turn a profit and that whole bit. So if you're understanding about cannabis and the culture of it and the way that these plants are grown with the TLC and some serious care, you're gonna want to gravitate towards a high quality product, because this is your life. I mean, you're talking about managing stressors and anxieties and sleep and inflammation, pain. I mean, this is a real sustainable tool without the running the risk of dependency, and it really just needs to be regulated in a fashion where you're going to push out a lot of these imposters.
That's part of why I wanted you on today, is because I wanted to, we're friends. I like you. I trust you. I know your heart and your integrity. And that's why if I'm going to talk about something I can't even use, I'm going to share with you. I have a degenerative joint disease. I have osteoarthritis throughout my body. I finally went to a rheumatologist last month, and he said, I don't have anything of the traditional stuff as far as rheumatoid arthritis or ankylosing spondylitis. He goes, but you have markers in your blood of high elevated inflammation. So now I'm on low dose prednisone, and I'm trying to figure out what's causing it. I would love.
Yeah, you're a perfect candidate.
Totally.
Inflammation is the ultimate.
So for me, I want to get to that point at some point in time in my life where I have the luxury of being able to take advantage of some natural healing processes. And it's unfortunate, but my job.
Sure.
Food on the table. So I got to do what I got to do in order to keep. I'll just keep managing the way I manage every day with my body. But I'm very pleased to be able to share this with people, because for me, if I'm going to put my name behind somebody who's going to talk about something that I can't use, and that is technically on some levels people think is illegal, at least I want to have the honest, straightforward, factual information put out there from you. So I appreciate you being the expert in this field for me on my show.
No problem. Anytime.
So I think one of the things that, obviously I want to talk a little bit about hockey, and we're going to come back then because I want to transition from hockey again back to a little bit more about your transition period.
Mm-hmm.
So when you were playing hockey, did you always, now you grew up in Canada,
Mm-hmm.
right? And whereabouts in Canada?
Winnipeg, Manitoba.
All right. And I know you have a sister. Right? Do you have any other siblings?
I have another sister that's younger. Yep.
Okay. And so your older sister is the one with MS?
Yes.
All right. Let's talk about her a little bit. I really think it's important because before we talk about hockey, the thing that really struck me when we first met, because you knew I was working with people with MS at Max Out, that you had shared with me about your sister and how the cannabis plant was helping her with her just dealing with the symptoms. Let's talk about her a little bit.
Sure. Well, she's, her diagnosis was really the one that kind of spawned my interest into the natural healing world. I didn't really fully embrace it till I retired. So I had snooped around a little bit before that, and starting from nutritional healing. That's really how I got into the hemp, the nutritional profile of the hemp seed, and anti-inflammatory diet. So when she I guess it might have been like 6, 7 years she was on traditional medicines for MS, and she bounced around from a couple different ones, but it eventually became so problematic where she was she was taking a needle in her leg every other day. It became so calcified and so hard that she couldn't even get the needles in anymore. That she was just and she was, how old is she? Must have been like 28 at the time. So really young still. And she was kind of just so fed up with the way it was going that she kind of was open to anything at that point. And that was right around when Canada started rolling out their medical cannabis program. And it took her a little while because we grew up very conservative and religious, and it took her a little while to wrap her head around it. But I kept kind of planting the seed with her, and do some research on it. But she started with the nutritional healing. So started removing foods that promote inflammation, kind of getting back to that whole world. Everything is inflammation. So removing foods that cause inflammation, dairy, and removing heavy metals out of her, or cosmetics, because God knows what's in that stuff, aluminum and some of these antiperspirants and whatever else. So removing the toxicity. So it's increasing the nutrition because we're usually deficient, and then removing the toxicity. So those things were working great. And then she added, the cannabis. She was doing some THC in the evening, more CBD during the day, working with kids. So she wanted to be clear and focused, and I get it. But she got really good response from that. So unfortunately, stress is a killer. No matter what you're dealing with, it is stress. Whether you do all these great things, if you don't manage your stress properly and sustainably, that's when you start having flare-ups. So I think there was a few moments in her life there where she changed jobs, and there's some stress related issues there that promoted some symptoms and stuff like that. But I think overall it's been pretty good. It's one of those things you got to stay on top of all the time. You're dealing with a disease state, and it's an interesting one because it's very misunderstood. So the whole thing is just high anti-inflammatory diet, really being cautious of toxins, and again managing stress. She does yoga, she does these other things. She's weaker than she probably should be, but she's almost 40 and she's not in a wheelchair, so I mean that's a bonus. It's like it's one of those things that we hope that she never has to. So just to stay on top of it. It's again going back to daily behaviors. It's all that. It's more of a focus on serious series of daily behaviors. So, but I've met since all that, I've met multiple people with MS, and it's disheartening to see how bad it gets, how quickly, if it's not controlled. You know what I mean? And the cannabis, all these things aren't going to cure it, but it's about increasing quality of life and keeping this at bay where it doesn't progress into a worse condition. So got to stay on top of it. That goes for all disease states, right? I mean, it's all abundance of inflammation, and just manifests itself in a different way in different people. So
yeah, I'm learning more. I've abused my body for 48 yeI have done a very poor job of managing my health, and I just sort of allow it to be, and I I don't like doctors, and I don't like attention. I don't like knowing things about my health. I prefer to, if it's going to take me by surprise.
Yeah.
And that's just the way I've lived my life my entire life. And it's not right, but it is where I'm at. And it's now recently I'm, 48. I'm getting older. I'm getting close to the end of my career. I haven't addressed any of my aches and pains. I can't get out of bed without massive pain, and it takes me, a long time to get my body moving, and every joint in my body hurts and every muscle aches. And I get how taking care of your body at some point in time, whether it's when you're 28 and you retire from hockey and you decide to, or when you're 48 and you're about ready to retire and you're like, oh shit, I may not have great insurance when I retire.
Right.
I need to go start taking care of some stuff.
Yeah.
Or you're MS patient who, thanks to the laws in Pennsylvania are changing slowly but surely, that they're going to be allowed to do that. And I wanted, I'm going to share this show with them, and if they're not watching already, and I want them to hear this. I want them to explore other ways of healing their body. And it hurts my heart when I see them and they're having a flare up, and their hope of max out's going to make them stronger and get better and do all that. And I want that for them so badly, but I don't know how to control MS. I don't know how to change, the myosin buildup in their brains, and I don't know how to do any of that stuff. And I don't know when they're having a good day or a bad day. And I want it so badly for them to have some level of consistency in their day, so that when they do come to me, the work that we do can pay dividends that they can see. So I really wanted to tell that story about your sister, because I wanted them to hear this when they see the video.
Sure.
There is hope.
Yeah. I mean, it really is a game changer. And cannabis is a crutch. And I say this in a positive way, because crutches help people walk. And I know people, like you kind of mentioned, you can't get out of bed without a bunch of pain. Like, there's literally people that can't get out of bed unless they use some sort of either painkiller or cannabis. It's usually started with a painkiller, but then they've turned to cannabis, and it's like that actually allows them to feel, calm enough and good enough to now move. So now the ownership is in their control, where they actually now have the ability to maybe attend a yoga class, where they couldn't actually do that anymore because they're so stiff, they're so sore, so much suffering going on. You know what I mean? And then when the physical body's like that, the mind, you know what I mean? The mind, it's just not right, because it's uneasy, because you're now stressed. Stress is increased, and energy is focused on things that we shouldn't be focusing on, or we should be focusing on wellness and doing positive things and positive energy. And people get trapped in the cycle, unfortunately, because the tools they typically are using aren't sustainable. And one thing leads to another. And then you go to the doctor, and then it's another thing, and it's then there's a side effect from the last drug, and then you don't even know where to begin. How do you even connect the dots of where the root cause of all this mumbo jumbo is? And so it really is reeling it in, simplifying. And for anybody that's listening that still doesn't understand that cannabis was the longest, oldest used medicine and resource on this planet up until the Industrial Revolution. It's nothing more than a political movement that plant-based medicines are illegal. It's not because they're bad for you. It interferes with the bottom line. And once you can wrap your head around that, you're essentially saved, because you're like voting with your dollars. I mean, it's like, are you going to go and support the opioid crisis, or are you going to go support the solution to the opioid crisis, which is cannabinoids? You know what I mean? The root cause of the opioid crisis is cannabis prohibition. It's like when you outlaw the sustainable alternative, people lean on opioids, synthetic heroin, and that's what's prescribed for pain in this country and in this world, for that matter, is a number one front line of defense mechanism. It's crazy. And then we sit around and we scratch our heads. How did this happen? How did this happen? Well, we let it happen. This is by design. This is not by accident. Science can't be that far off on science with all these highly paid scientists and medical professionals. You know what I mean? We can't get it that wrong by accident. I mean, so that's what's frustrating. But once you start peeling back these layers, you can understand it a little bit better. Where I think most people could see that the system is flawed and on many different levels. But especially when you see the healthcare crisis we're in. You know what I mean? Where we're fat, sick, and nearly dead, and mentally ill. It's like, and I say that with all due respect because I see it on a daily basis, and it hurts me. It hurts me so bad, and that's why I'm so driven to really try and be on the right side of history with this whole thing. And I might seem crazy to some people because I'm passionate about something that is misunderstood and is taboo still, but like, give it 5-10 years. I mean, there's been people preaching this longer than I have. And props to them because they're putting themselves out there way before this, this wave of, the bandwagon CBD guys now. You know what I mean? This is ancient stuff, and we just have to shift our way of thinking, and it starts with our food. You know what I mean? It really I think we've been a slave to this industrialized food system where we, again, going back to what I said earlier, we forget that we're natural beings, and we do have to abide by natural laws. Otherwise, the human body responds in a negative fashion. If you don't manage your stressors and anxieties, and if you don't, sleep properly, which is the spine of recovery, if you don't manage your inflammation and pain, well, they're all enhanced the next morning, and pain is enhanced, anxiety is enhanced. And then what do? We chase the dragon. We stimulants. We wake up in the morning, we got to have our coffee. We got, and then that induces some anxiety and stress, and then all of a sudden we're tense and we're driving like this, and you know what I mean? We're frustrated, we're angry, things are bothering us. You know what I mean? We can never calm ourselves, and that's what cannabis has the ability to do. Whether you're talking about the hemp-derived CBD side, it really does have a calming nature. And then if you want to be honest with the other side of things, anything above 0.3% THC in the marijuana world, well, you talk about self-medicating, and you look at society, we self-medicate with alcohol. Alcohol is the most accepted, arguably most destructive substance known to man. It's put down more people than probably the opioid crisis, if you want to break it down. Violence, domestic, car accidents, just self-destruction, and all these things. And that's what I lived in the hockey world. I mean, I moved away from home when I was 16, and beer drinking was, that was what we did: play hockey and drink beer. Unfortunately, I've seen so many guys go through the substance abuse program for just alcohol, let alone mixing in. Once we turn pro, and all of a sudden, the pharmaceutical world's opened up. It's just bad for mental health. It's bad for all around wellness. And I just know there's such a better way to do things. It's going to take some time for people to understand this, but cannabis on the resinous side, the marijuana side, if you want to call it that. I don't like that word, but if it's dosed properly and respected, is an unbelievable tool. It actually is an exit drug. Gets people off opioids, gets people off alcoholism, and it helps people find themselves because it brings calmness and peace and sleep, and that's what we're trying to find. We're all trying to achieve the same goal. We're going about it differently. Ambience and muscle relaxers and NyQuil and all these different things. And it's just like, at what point do we just sit back and absorb what Mother Nature has blessed us with and roll with it?
Dude, I wish I had that luxury to do that.
I know, I hear you.
The marijuana part, because obviously that would be negative on my image. Just because even though it may be perfectly great for me, but the image side would be bad. But the CBD side, and just if I could just get out of bed and not be in pain. I told my wife the other day, I've been on this low dose for about a week of prednisone. And, I drink Tito's at night. I'll have a couple drinks to help me go to sleep. And one day I didn't. I woke up the next morning. I'll go to the gym in the morning, play basketball. I'm still trying to stay active, even though it hurts. Mm-hmm. I felt like I was 19. I was running up and down the court. I felt amazing. And then I realized that I didn't drink that night, any alcohol the night before. Mm-hmm. Prednisone, while it's a drug, an anti-inflammatory, was able to do its part. So I wasn't reintroducing inflammation into my body. And all of a sudden I felt, man, my body feels great. So I only wish that I could replicate how I felt for that hour. I haven't felt, literally, that was the best I've felt in 25 years. And I know there's a way that at some point in time in my life, I'm hopefully going to be able to experience that again without pumping myself with other drugs.
Right.
So I just hope it's sooner rather than later, where it's more accepted and it's not something that, takes my ability to own a gun away and be a police officer.
Sure.
So at some point in time, I'd like that to not be the ramifications for living without pain.
Right.
So let's transition a little bit. I want to talk about hockey because I think everybody wants to hear a couple good stories about your fighting days. And I posted a video on my page with that was like a 10-minute highlight tape of your throwdowns. And, I've talked to Schulte before, and he told me he'd never been in a fight where he wasn't on hockey skates. And he's like, I've never punched anybody in the face if they weren't on hockey skates, and neither was I. Did you always have a desire to fight, or did you go, I'm going to be Wayne Gretzky, and things just took a right turn?
Well, I actually thought I was Wayne Gretzky when I was younger, believe it or not. That was the dream, is to play, when you're a young kid, to play hockey the way you're playing it, carrying the puck, being an offensive guy, scoring goals. It wasn't till I turned pro. I think juniors humbled me. I only fought in 4 years in junior hockey. I think I fought in 4 years, maybe 20, 22 times. So like nothing crazy. I mean, 4 or 5 times a year dust ups. But when I turned pro, I wasn't drafted. I made a decision. It was nothing more than that. I was a competitive guy. I think I only been in two street fights my whole life, and it wasn't me like picking them. It was me basically sticking out for my buddies, and I just realized that I was competitive enough, and I had enough, deep-seated desire to make it that I could do it. So I just, it's all about the way you think, right? If you turn your mind a certain way and think a certain way, you can do anything, right? So I just told myself I was going to be an NHL fighter. So I started in the Central Hockey League, turned pro when I was 20, and started fighting. So I said I fight the biggest guy and the guy with the most penalty minutes in every team. So I said I always wanted to be the top 3 in fighting majors every year. I just had some goals. Certainly not different. It's certainly different goals.
Goals.
Yeah. So I went from like trying to score 50 goals a year to trying to fight 35 times a year. You know what I mean? It sounds a little bit crazy, but I just realized that was my only chance to making it. And I think I might have gotten to role playing the role playing probably even too much. It almost to the point where it was like it worked against me in a sense where I almost stopped worrying about playing hockey and forgot there was a puck on the ice. Because when I grew up in Winnipeg, I was always the biggest fish in the small pond there. Even in Manitoba in the province. When I moved away from juniors, I realized, oh shit, I'm like, there's some really good hockey players in the Western Canada here. And when I turned pro, now I'm going up against the best in the world, and everyone's competing for these 3 leagues, an NHL, American League, and East Coast Hockey League, wherever. So I just realized that the guys getting called up, lots of goals and lots of penalty minutes. There's still a role for that back then. There's still 3 tough guys a team. So that's what I did, and I was just basically the role consumed me. I was just so wrapped up in fighting, just going to the gym, lifting extra, not being mindful about it, just like lifting, thinking that the muscle mass is going to make me a better fighter. I was humbled by that philosophy pretty quickly when I got in the American Hockey League and realized that, that I wasn't very functional. And, Jimmy McCrossin, the strength coach, called me out on that because I was so stiff and lifting so much. But nonetheless, driven to get better, and driven to, and coachable. So I would, listen to different philosophies and became a little bit more functional, but still meathead in the sense where I just look at these martial artists and these UFC fighters, and they're so dialed in, they're so mindful. Yes, they're explosive, they're lean, they're functional, and I wasn't any of that. I was a stiff meathead. But it was up here that was, I think, made me I say crazy, but made me be able to be able to at least accomplish it. Right? It wasn't pretty. It wasn't the way I probably could have done it in a better fashion, but it served its purpose. But I also think by me being fearless like that, and me being a guy that basically, if you put me on the ice, you knew something was going to happen in a sense where I was going to, either blow somebody up or at least try and start a fight. So, I think from a coaching perspective, a management perspective, they knew what they were going to get from me. When we talk about pro sports, we talk about consistency. Like I'm dressing 12 forwards and 60 and 2 goalies. Who are most consistent players? And what are they going to bring? Even if they're not scoring goals, are they bringing energy? Are they reliable in the D zone? Are they going to hit every time, finish a check, and they stick up? So I guess I could say and understand why the coaches always liked me, and it's because I was consistent. Whether I fought or not, I showed up with energy. I was vocal. I was aggressive, and those little variables, I think, are what gave me a chance to even dress for one Flyers game. You know what I mean? It was the ability to do that, and I was actually able to stay healthy pretty well up until I got with the Flyers. I didn't have a whole lot of injuries leading up, but that's a whole other thing, is staying healthy while you're doing this. But the fighting was never ingrained in me, ingrained in me at all. It was something I had to do. I took it as an absolute challenge the first few years, and I actually kind of enjoyed it. It was a new thing, but then eventually, as you might assume, it wears on you, mentally and emotionally. It's like you're always jacking yourself up to fight. There's this chronic state of anxiety. Even if I wasn't fighting that night, even if I wasn't playing that night, I'm thinking about tomorrow, fighting Donald Brashear, fighting George LaRock, fighting Brian McGrath and Cold Nor. Didn't matter. It was the toughest guy, top 5 toughest guy every time I played a team. So there was no escaping that feeling. So as you can imagine, I've had conversations with vets before, and not that we're anywhere near the same, where they're overseas fighting a completely different battle, but the chronic state of anxiety was identified is very similar, where you're always on edge, right? Even if I fought the first period of a game, I wasn't just like, okay, I'm gonna put my feet up and relax here tonight. When game's over, I'm gonna take the night off. I was like, okay, if I won, he might be coming after me. If he blows someone up, I have to fight. You know what I mean? I can't just stop thinking about it. So that's where I really struggled. I think that's where probably substance abuse kind of came in more, because I was trying to mask these symptoms of I never really felt like that before. And it's, again, this ego. It's like I had this image to uphold. I was a tough guy. And I was like, I'm not a tough guy. I mean, in the sense of, I'll stick up and fight any day, all day long. But that's not really my nature, to go look for fights and, be controversial. I don't like confrontation for absolutely no reason. I mean, I'm more of a guy who I just walk away, if you know what I mean, and just, take a deep breath. But, it wears on you. You know what I mean? It wasn't like I was, some guys I've played with, and you see it in the boxing and the UFC stuff, is there's a lot of suffering growing up, and there's a lot of, there's a lot of deep-seated anger that these guys become fighters. And I can't say I had that, but there's something deep-seated that was driving me to be a fighter, because it's not for everybody. Not anybody just be like, I'm just going to go fight, and I'll fight 30, 35 times a year. And who really wants to do that? I'd rather score 50 a year, you know what I mean? And make $5 million a year, instead of the league minimum, and fighting 30, 35 times a year against guys way to my weight class. So it's one of those things in life, when you're driven, you want something, you have to get your hands dirty. You know what I mean? There's no easy way to do anything. It's, I didn't make billions of dollars playing the NHL either, but what it did give me was a pretty good perspective on the things that matter in life. You know what I mean? And it's that was what I identified as my health. I mean, that's the term, your health is your wealth. I mean, especially in this country. I mean, you go bankrupt, you get sick in this country, pre-existing conditions and whatnot. So I had to preserve that, and it was about preserving my brain after being punched probably 2,000 times in the head and whatever else, and that was going back to the cannabis thing, the neuroprotectant properties of cannabis, which I haven't mentioned. The U.S. government holds a patent on them. That when I started to understand that is when I started to identify brain health, and extremely passionate about the brain and brain health, because again, I went from fighting one night and drinking beers after it, so dehydrating my dehydrated body already with alcohol, and using that as a sleep mechanism, and how toxic that is for the brain, to the complete opposite, which is all about hydration in the brain. It's like feeding the brain what it needs, and it's amazing how your mental health, transitions, put in a positive manner when you start working with the natural laws. So it's the fighting thing is interesting. I'll always be a stand-up guy. I mean, but I'm not going to be a guy that's going to go look for reckless fights, because that's not me. But I mean, if there was a time and a place where I had to defend myself and my family, I have absolutely zero problem doing it. But the fighting in hockey was nothing more than a job, and for me to fulfill my dream. Other than that, I would have never done it.
Well, here's what I'm going to take from this. We got about 3 minutes left. What I heard was you had a desire and a passion so strong that you found the niche that would allow you to achieve your goal through mental preparation, mental toughness, and a strategic plan to go out and execute it. That's what I hear from that entire thing. It wasn't I was a great fighter. It wasn't I have all this deep sea. It was literally you said I want this so badly. How do I go do it? And you coursed out a plan that had the actual ability to be successful.
Yeah.
And I think you've done that now in the second phase of your life with what you're doing with hemp and with cannabis and the nonprofit and all the other stuff that you're doing right now. I think it's phenomenal. We could do the whole another hour in this show, and we may have you back do another hour.
Sure.
I think it's going to be a very well received show. But I know a lot of people are commenting in the comments. They want to know, how can they get a hold of you? How can they find out more about the products that you're making? What's your website? All that kind of stuff.
Sure. So it's BodyChek Wellness, CHEK wellness.com. And that's the hemp derived CBD company. Finding me on social media at Riley Coyote, RILEECOYOTE. That's Twitter. I think Riley Coyote 32 on Twitter. Sorry, Riley Coyote on Instagram, and just standard Riley Cote on Facebook. But yeah, I mean, reach out. I mean, I field a ton of questions and people reaching out, social media, email, text. I mean, I feel like there's a 3 or 4 a day that I'm getting, and I really have no problem helping people out. So if there's any questions about products or just things they're dealing with, and I can maybe shed some experience on people that I've dealt with or my own personal experiences with it. But I mean, we're not in the disease state side of things, even though it does work for some disease state stuff. Our whole target audience is, I say, the recovery side of things, and that's just inflammation, pain, anxiety, sleep, and protecting the brain, the neuroprotective properties. And I think the sleep thing, man, once you start sleeping really crisp, deep, it's just amazing. I was always a pretty good sleeper, but it's a different dimension. And again, you said you woke up feeling like 19 years old. Like that's how I feel now. Honestly, I feel better now than I did even 20 years old going into pro, because I'm just more functional. I'm focused on breath. It seems interesting. It seems weird to talk about, but like we breathe so shallow, right? We're stressed, we're anxious, we breathe shallow. And it's the food of the yogi is breath, right? I mean, it's like breath. It's just so simple to understand without it. And little things like that. And it's been a wild ride. So I just encourage anybody to do their own research. Don't take my word for it. I just like to plant seeds. The whole part of life is to figure out universal truths and figure them out with especially now, age of information. You can read both sides of every argument and make an educated decision. We shouldn't be just taking, one side so seriously without, doing your own research, because what you start learning, once you start peeling back these layers, is there's a lot of things that we've been fundamentally misled by. And we're so naive to think that everything that we're told is true. So this is a big one. This is increasing quality of life and general well-being for all. Doesn't matter who you are. No one's making you out of this life alive, but there's a lot of suffering that can be prevented by doing things the right way. And I've lived it, and I'm blessed and fortunate enough to have found this path. Again, it wasn't by design. It was through a lot of suffering, telling you the truth. And I don't want to see people go through a fraction of what I went through, but I know there's people that have gone through way more than I've gone through, and it's bothersome to see how much suffering is going on. And I just want to, not that we're going to remove suffering across the planet, but if we can remove it in some capacity for each individual, life is so much better, and I think that's what it's all about.
Well, dude, I appreciate you coming on. I think it was amazing. I could have talked about this forever. Hang tight. Don't go anywhere. Once I end the show, you and I will talk offline.
Sure.
But everybody, thank you. I hope this show did many things. One, it gave you a look inside the life of a professional athlete, especially one that did a job that was not necessarily conventional by most logical human beings. He did things that hockey's the only sport where they plan to have fist fights on ice with bare knuckles. And I think what he did as a profession helped sculpt who he is today, because had he not gone through that that goal setting that he made to become a professional hockey player, he would never have gone through the suffering he went through that led him to where he is today. So I think the journey that Riley's been on has been amazing. I think he's just scratching the surface with what he's going to do. And I hope I'll put the comments for his website and all that stuff on the Facebook post itself. And Riley, I appreciate you. Everybody, thank you for listening to another episode of the 2 Dates and a Dash podcast. I'm your host, Matt Kubler. Thank you to Riley Cote for being on. God bless, and for God's sakes, be kind to one another.